Hello and welcome to Natasha Explains It All. We are a couple of weeks out from the presidential election, and I know that a lot of people, at least in my circles, have been getting really nervous about what's going to happen. And while I obviously don't know what's going to happen, I feel very confident that Kamala is going to win. It's going to be okay. It doesn't mean that we should relax or stop donating or stop volunteering or stop otherwise encouraging our friends and family to vote and to vote early. We still need to do all of that stuff. And the race will still be closer than it honestly should be because everything that Trump is doing is out of the Nazi playbook, and democracy will not survive if Trump is elected. But Kamala will win. And let's put in our best foot forward for the next couple of weeks to bring it over the finish line. So with that in mind, what I wanted to address in today's short episode is about the additional stakes and the additional races that there are for November and additional ways to direct any anxious energy that you may be feeling right now to helping secure a win for November. And what I mean by that is we need the presidency, of course. We need Kamala to win to ensure that democracy continues to be the form of government the United States has. But really to have a Harris administration that is effective, we also need Democrats to retake the House and for Democrats to maintain the Senate. And just to point out a couple of important roles that each of those congressional bodies have and why it would matter who is in power. In the House of Representatives right now, Republicans have a majority by just a few seats. And with that majority, they have blocked consideration of all kinds of very important legislation, whether it's related to reproductive rights, voting rights, climate change, or more. And so the ability to pass any progressive legislation under Harris administration requires that Democrats have a majority in the House, because otherwise that legislation will never pass the House. On the Senate side, the Democrats right now have a majority. It is a very slim majority, and the Senate has many important roles. And one of those extremely important roles is regarding the federal judiciary, not just the Supreme Court, but all of the federal courts. The president nominates federal judges, but the Senate has to approve those nominations for those people to become federal judges. And as some of you may be aware, Trump, during his presidency, filled the federal judiciary with yes men who have been wreaking havoc on our legal system, in addition to appointing 3 justices to the Supreme Court who are all quite extremist. Now, if Democrats are able to maintain a majority in the Senate, then that means that Democrats will be able to confirm the nominations to the Supreme Court, to the federal courts that Harris nominates. If Republicans have a majority in the Senate, I can guarantee you that they will block her ability to appoint federal judges, particularly to the Supreme Court. This is what happened when Obama was president and Republicans had a majority in the Senate. Mitch McConnell, who is a senator from Kentucky, who at the time was the Senate Majority Leader, he barred President Obama from seating Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court, even though President Obama was still president and had nominated him to the Supreme Court. Mitch McConnell used the fact that Republicans were in the majority in the Senate to keep that seat open. Justice Antonin Scalia had died, and so there was an opening on the Supreme Court. And Mitch McConnell refused to allow Obama to fill that seat, and he kept it open until Trump took office. And so the stakes are extremely high for Democrats to maintain the Senate. On the Supreme Court at the moment, we have Thomas and Alito, who are the extremists of the extremists, they're both elderly. It is possible that the next president will decide their replacements. And it is much better for the future of this country that it is Harris who gets to pick those replacements and not Trump. So anyway, my point is that we've got to win the White House, but we also need to have majorities in both the Senate and the House to ensure that the type of legislation that we need to undo a lot of the harm of the Trump administration and to implement new progressive laws that are needed in a variety of areas, everything from reproductive rights to immigration, to voting rights, to climate change, to consumer protection, to education, etc., require that Democrats have a majority in both the House and the Senate. So we need a blue trifecta. We need to have the presidency and both parts of Congress. So with that in mind, what I will be providing in the show notes for today's episode is a couple of campaigns that I have, or funds, I guess I should say, that I have come across that have identified races on both the House and the Senate side that are very close and are underfunded. So we talked about that, the presidential race is close, and it honestly is way closer than it should be, given just absolutely how horrific a second Trump presidency would be and how dangerous and incompetent he is. And really, a second Trump administration is a Vance administration. I don't want that person in charge and being able to have say over my body and my rights. So that's a close race, but even closer than the presidential race are several key House and Senate races that will come down to voter turnout. And supporting those campaigns, if you have the means to donate, is a great way to supporting, to ensuring that Dems can retake the House as well as maintain the Senate. So again, in the show notes, I'm going to include a couple of opportunities that I have come across to donate to key congressional races that have been identified as like very tight races where really either candidate could win, and there is a need for an influx of funding to really boost voter turnout in these final weeks before the election. And so these are races where you're going to get more bang for your buck. These are the races that really could decide things. And as I mentioned, in both the House as well as the Senate, the margin is very, very small. In the House, the Democrats only need to pick up a couple of seats to retake the majority. And in the Senate, it's even tighter. Democrats have to hold on to everything they've got, and they've got to pick up a seat. Now that Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia has retired. So if you're feeling the final weeks leading up to the presidential election very anxiety-inducing, I highly recommend contributing, if you have the means, to these particular races and sharing this information with others. And share this information with others, donate if you can, and I always go back to postcards with voters. It's a great way as a creative outlet to put your election anxiety to use, and Postcards to Voters also is focused on picking very important races where the difference in turnout really matters, and that targeted voter outreach can make the difference in the election outcome. So that's all for today. Thanks so much for listening. Stay focused, keep engaged, don't watch cable TV, and we'll get through this and we're going to be okay. Thanks for listening. See you next time.